What's up, everybody? Welcome to episode 2 of CFB Only with Deep Shot Garry. I am him, Deep Shot Garry. Hold on, I'm going to check. Got this live stream going. Going to pull up the chat so I can interact with you guys as we get going. But thank you again for being here. Episode 2, got a big show for you guys tonight. We've got top 10 quarterback rankings. I'm sure that everybody will agree with mine. Got Bama and Oregon schedule review. Going to go through all lists of games again. Probably not going to give wins or loss predictions, but just kind of go through and look at what they've got coming up in 2026. I've got my 5 worst jobs in college football, Power 4 only. All right, we're not picking UMass or Kent State here, but Power 4 jobs, worst in college football, and then Trinidad Chambliss, the ruling that he's going to be eligible. I know a lot of people saw that, had kind of their opinion, so I'm going to give you guys my take on that here tonight. So thanks again for being here. Second episode, every Tuesday night at 7 p.m. we'll be here. If you're in the chat, let me know, and let's get into it. Before we start, just want to always ask you, follow Deep Shot Sports on Instagram and TikTok. We just passed 3,000 followers yesterday or the day before on Instagram, so thank you from the bottom of my heart. Feels good, but we got so much more to climb. We've got to keep going up and up and up. Got to get to at least 5,000 before football season. If we get anything more, I'll be really appreciative. So make sure you follow, subscribe to this YouTube channel as well. It really helps me out. And I'm not just asking you because I need it, which I do, but we got great content on there. I think we've had like 7 million views in the last 30 days on the Instagram page, so we're posting good stuff up there. All the football you can want is on Deep Shot Sports on Instagram and TikTok, so make sure you guys give us a follow there. All right, let's go ahead and start talking about the first subject we've got tonight, and that is the top 10 quarterbacks. Now, look, it's the offseason. A lot of people are giving out their list of top 10 programs, top 10 head coaches, top 10 quarterbacks. So that's what I've got tonight for you guys. I've got my top 10. Now, look, again, I've said this before. I'll say it again. I would like to know your opinion. If you disagree, just let me know. I want to hear your opinion. This is, kind of based on what they can be like in the NFL, that kind of goes into the mix of what I'm putting together for this list, but also what I think they're going to do next year, what I've seen them do in this past couple seasons. So without further ado, here we go. Going to pull up the list for you guys. All right, let's go ahead and start talking about it. We'll go 1 to 10. That sound good with everybody? Number 1, I've got Dante Moore. Look, he is arguably could have been the number 1 draft pick if he came out this year. He decided to come back to Oregon for one more season. If you look at the stats, just this past season, he had 71% completion percentage, threw for 3,500 yards, 30 touchdowns to 10 interceptions. So you kind of want that touchdown-interception ratio to go up. I don't know if it would go up or down. I'm not good at the math, but you want it to get better, right? 3-1, that's okay, but you want it to get a little bit better. Feels like he had a ton of those, maybe had 3 or 4 in that Indiana game that probably, kind of turmoiled the stats a little bit, but he makes all the throws. I think about the game where they played Iowa and they had 30 seconds to go down the field and get in field goal range, and he put one on the money with a corner in the receiver's face, only where his guy could get it. And there's a reason he was supposed to be number 1 overall if he came out, or at least competing for it with Fernando Mendoza. So I've got him number 1. I mean, he's 6'3". Over 200 pounds. I mean, he's got all the intangibles, and I think with the experience, this is going to be his 4th year in college football. So this is pretty much second and a half full year starting. He got a little bit of starting time at UCLA before coming to Oregon, sitting a year, and now he's going to start again for his second year for Oregon. So I've got Dante Moore at number 1. Number 2, I got Arch Manning. I'm maybe a little bit higher on Arch Manning than some other people, but I think last year he really peaked at the end of the season. I know we can talk. I'm a Georgia fan. Look, we all know that. In that Georgia game, he probably didn't play that well. But look at the Texas A&M game. You look at the Michigan game. You look just like in the latter half of November. Like it was obvious he was starting to get a feel for it. They played Vandy. He played well. And I think, I talked about last week, Cam Coleman's going to be showing up on the scene for Texas this year. I really think that the step that we all thought Arch Manning was going to take last year when he came in and was going to be he was going to be, this awesome quarterback. Took him a little while, but I think with a year underneath his belt, Steve Sarkisian, obviously one of the best offensive coaches. I think Arch is really going to excel. And the rushing aspect is something I have to look at here too. I know, look, there's a lot of guys on this list that I'll probably bring up their rushing stats. I know they're not running backs, but being able to be mobile as a quarterback is a really big deal, and I think Arch Manning is one of the most mobile quarterbacks on this list. He was 26 touchdowns and 7 interceptions last year, so he takes care of the ball fairly well. I think Arch Manning is in for a really good season. And look, it's still a Manning. You have to think about that. That's in the back of your head, right? So I'm going to put Arch Manning there at 2. Number 3, I'm going with Darian Mensah. Look, I've talked about him a little bit last week when I did my top 10 transfers. He had over 500. He had 500 attempts. I can't remember if it was over or right at 500, but he had 500 attempts last year. It was like the most in FBS or the most in the ACC. And he threw for almost 4,000 yards at Duke. 34 touchdowns. So he was already one of the better quarterbacks, kind of sitting at a place that nobody really knew about. And now he's going to go to Miami, and everyone's going to pretty much know about him. And I'm telling you, he's going to excel with the type of talent they got out there. I went through all that last week with him going there. That means he's got guys like Malachi Toney and Mark Fletcher to help him out. He's going to have way better talent than he's ever been around, and I think it's going to really cause him to be a lot better, and he's already pretty good, especially with those stats and the amount of attempts I just listed. Number 4, Trinidad Chambliss. So I'm going to talk about his eligibility ruling later on in the show, but look, he is back. He's coming back to play college football, and when you look at what he did last year on limited time, like he didn't even start the season as a starting quarterback. I think he came in week 3 was when he finally started to be the guy at Ole Miss, and he still threw for almost 4,000 yards, 22 touchdowns, and again, a mobile guy. 445 rushing yards, I think 6 or 7 touchdowns. He might be the most athletic guy on this list. Like in terms of, going left to right, making something when nothing's there, kind of getting mobile outside the pocket, he might be the best guy on this list. And I think if you're an Ole Miss fan, obviously you're excited. If you're not, if you're somebody that's got to play Ole Miss next year, you may not be excited that he's coming back. But Trinidad Chambliss is without a doubt a star, and he showed it last year. He got his team to the Final Four. It's a huge thing that he's coming back, and he's obviously one of the better quarterbacks in college football coming into the 2026 season. Number 5, I got Gunnar Stockton. Look, he is a tough SOB. We all know that. If you watch Georgia football, you know this guy will take a hit. You know this guy will do anything to win the ball game. And he's just a really good quarterback. I mean, he was a 5-star coming out of high school. He was his first year starting. He goes on a great run and does everything he needs to do. And if he needs to throw for 300 yards, 400 yards, 4 touchdowns, 5 touchdowns, he can do it. He's shown he can do it. You think about the big throw he had made against Tennessee. You think about the game against Texans where he threw for 4 and ran for 1. I mean, that's another thing. He's really mobile. Ran for 10 touchdowns last year. Gives us a great threat and is not scared to put his head down and lay down a hit. And look, he finished 7th in the Heisman voting last year. So this is not just, Georgia fans saying this about Georgia quarterback. The proof is there. This guy has been a really good quarterback for one of the better teams in the country. And I think I think putting him at 5 is very fair. If you don't think Gunnar Stockton's one of the better quarterbacks coming into college football next year with the experience he's already got, I don't know what to tell you. Number 6, I got Byron Brown. Again, maybe a guy that I'm a little bit higher on than other people. Okay, like Byron Brown is obviously from South Florida, coming to Auburn with Alex Golesh. I went through the stats last year. He was on my top 10 transfer list as well. Ran for over 1,000, threw for 3,000, 42 total touchdowns last season. And the big thing is, like, South Florida, they were 9-3, I think, last year, but their offense was not the problem. I mean, they were scoring points at will. They had a really tough time being a good defensive team, and that's probably what kept them out of the college football playoff at the end of the day. But Byron Brown is an absolute stud. I went through. He's like 6'3", 230. I mean, I said Trinidad, like he reminds me of Cam Newton. Auburn fans would probably take that and know that they're going to get a guy that has that kind of intangibles. I don't know the height and weight of Cam Newton off the top of my head, but Byron Brown kind of reminds me of that, and I think he will be a star for Auburn and in the SEC. Number 7, I got Julian Sayin. Some people may think this is low or high. I don't know what a lot of people's thoughts on are Julian Sayin. He was obviously a Heisman finalist last season, came in 4th. He threw for 36. He threw for 3,600 yards, 33 touchdowns, 8 interceptions. I mean, he had 75% completion percentage, which is just awesome as a quarterback. I mean, you're completing 3 out of every 4 passes pretty much. But then again, he kind of has like the easiest job in college football, getting the throw to Jeremiah Smith, Carnell Tate. Obviously, Carnell Tate's not going to be there, but we all know about Ohio State's wide receiver room and how deep it is every single season. So, when he had to play some tougher teams like Indiana and Miami at the end of the year, there were some mistakes that he made. And I think he'll get better from that. I think Julian Saint is obviously still a really good quarterback. He was highly recruited out of high school. But I don't think he's, in terms of what he'll bring to the table athletically or, a difference maker, I don't think I've seen that yet. So I've got him down at 7. Number 8, I got Jaden Maiava. I think I said that name correctly. USC's quarterback, 3,700 yards last year, led the Big Ten in passing yards, playing for Lincoln Riley. All right, you can go down the list. Lincoln Riley has made great quarterbacks every year pretty much. Baker Mayfield, Kyler Murray, Caleb Williams, list goes on. I think Maiava is going to be just maybe not number 1 pick in the draft good, but he is going to get even better this season with Lincoln Riley and another year of experience. I've talked highly about USC and the team I think they've got. They've got really good weapons on the wide receiver room. I think Jaden Maiava I don't think this was a hot take to put him top 10. Maybe people are a little – I think this is fair. Like, I don't think anybody thinks he's top 5. I don't think anybody thinks he's outside the top 10. So I got him here at 8. Number 9, I got Drew Messemaker, another guy I'm really high on that maybe some people aren't. But, I mean, he's 43 – threw for the most yards in FBS last year, 4,379 yards, 34 touchdowns. He's in a new conference, right? He's not at North Texas anymore. He's going to be at Oklahoma State, going to be in the Big 12. I talked about it a little bit last week. Big 12 defense is, not the scariest thing in the world. So we'll see. I don't think it'll be too much of a big adjustment. I think he'll still be able to make the throws and be super accurate and be, just as good as he was, if not better. And with a whole nother year of experience under his belt. And number 10, I got Sam Leavitt. Obviously hurt last year for about half the season, so he didn't get a lot of stats, but the year before he threw for over 2,800 yards, 24 touchdowns, ran for another 440. And I really think, Lane Kiffin has never, chugged out a bad quarterback. And I think that's the biggest thing here is, at the end of the day, Lane Kiffin is going to have this guy excelling at whatever he wants him to do. So I got Sam Leavitt there at 10. What do you guys think about that list? If you have somebody that we think we may have left off, I think maybe one name I can put up there is like CJ Carr for Notre Dame. I kind of teetered with him around 9 or 10. I just think the running game was so prevalent for Notre Dame last year. The schedule was really easy. He did get better through the year, but I'm not really sure I can put him in the top 10 right now. Guys like John Mateer, kind of teetering there. I need to see more. It looked like, through 5 games last year, he was going to be really good, but things kind of teetered off towards the end. So what do you guys think? Where would you put certain guys I didn't put? Did I put too many guys in here that you wouldn't even have in your top 10? Go ahead and let me know in the comments. All right, next thing we're going to talk about, the Bama 2026 schedule. So obviously last week I talked about Georgia and Ohio State. I'm going to talk about Bama's schedule here in a second. I'm also going to talk about Oregon's after that. Obviously, we brought up 9-game SEC schedules now, so everybody's SEC schedule or every SEC team schedule gets a little bit tougher. And then Alabama has to play Florida State. We're going to talk about that. So they've got 10 Power 4 teams they got to play. Let's go ahead and pull up the schedule here now. All right, week 1, they got East Carolina. Everyone's got to get their games in. This is an American Athletic Conference as East Carolina's in. Everybody's moving conferences, so you never know nowadays. But they are in the American. They'll probably win that game. If they don't, things could go wrong. All right, at Kentucky in week 2. Fun stat for you guys. Bama is 39-2-1 all time against Kentucky. Kentucky's last win against Alabama was in 1997. That's pretty crazy. They played 2023 was the last time they played. Obviously, Kentucky's got a new head coach, Will Stein, coming from Oregon, and then they got Kenny Minchey The quarterback from Notre Dame that was going to Nebraska and is now going to Kentucky. Big test for Kentucky. I mean, if they can prove something here, I mean, you never know. I have a hard time believing Alabama could lose this game, but a lot of people are not high on Alabama going into this upcoming season. So we'll see where that is, but they're going to Lexington in week 2. Week 3, Florida State. At home this time, so they're playing them in Tuscaloosa. Obviously got the revenge factor, right? That last year was a super embarrassing game in week 1. Like I mentioned with Texas and Ohio State last week, their game's in week 2. This game's in week 3. So, and they're going to play an SEC team before this. They're going to play Kentucky. Like, they're going to have a good gist of what their team is at this point. And I think that's really good for them. Instead of playing this game in week 1, you kind of know what you've got at least a little bit. You kind of know what your quarterback likes. You know what kind of tendencies your team has. I think that's good in the long run if you're going to play these out-of-conference games. Like, playing in week 2 and week 3 might be a really smart play. That's all. That's what I'm really trying to get at. So, but if Bama loses this game, like, oh my God, could you imagine a turmoil if Alabama went out and lost to Florida State for the second year in a row, and then Florida State turns around and has another 5-7, 4-8 season? Like, if Florida State fans get to walk around, with a flag that says "We own Alabama," could you imagine that? It would be really, the seat would get very hot for Kalen DeBoer. Week 4, they got South Carolina. Third year in a row they're playing this game against South Carolina. They obviously won the last 2 in close fashion. Both of them are very close games. South Carolina, they've got Lenore Sellers. The offensive line was really bad last year. We'll see how that is going to be. They've got guys like Dylan Stewart on the defense, but that game's at home early in the season. I'm not sure. South Carolina is a team that I'll talk about eventually, but I don't really see them. I can't tell, honestly. I don't want to give an opinion on them yet. Week 5 at Mississippi State. First time since the SEC West days these two teams are going to match up. Mississippi State has not beat Alabama since 2007. Interesting stat there. Mississippi State, last year they only won one SEC game. I feel like if Alabama is going to need an easy one, because the next little stretch they got after this is going to get tough. This is probably where they need to have a win before they go into this tough stretch. Sip of water. All right. Week 6, Georgia. They got UGA at home. Probably a night game. I talked about this last week when I previewed the Georgia schedule. Will they be 5-0? Is Alabama going to be 5-0 at this game? Yes or no? They've got East Carolina, Kentucky, Florida State, South Carolina, Mississippi State, and then they got Georgia. Is Alabama 5-0 when they play Georgia? That's a question that I don't know. I don't know if they are 5-0. A lot of people are low on Alabama. Their schedule's not that tough for the first 5 games. But are they 5-0? Are they 4-1? It's going to be different. Are their backs against the wall, or are they at the potential of having 2 losses if they lose to Georgia, or are they potential of being 6-0 if they lose to Georgia, or are they the potential of being 6-0 after they beat Georgia and then before they go into this tough stretch? Like, that's a big question. So that'll be interesting to see. Obviously, they have the success over Georgia. Georgia's got the last one, so we'll see. Week 7, they go to Tennessee. They've lost the last 2 games in Neyland Stadium. Lost in 2024, and obviously lost in 2022, the big field goal post in the River game. So is that just something maybe Tennessee gets to say now? Like, when they come to Neyland, is it the new when they come to Jordan-Hare, we got them? Does Tennessee get to say that? Because Alabama, they play UGA the week before this. That's obviously going to be a big emotional game for them. And then they got to go to Tennessee, which is obviously a rivalry they play every single year. Like, 2 big emotional games back-to-back for Alabama, and then they have to win. And the second one, they have to go on the road. So that's going to be a big test that I'm interested to see. Then they play A&M at home. First time since the SEC West days they're going to play them. So I haven't played since 2023. And like I said, look at this. Week 6, Week 7, Week 8, October. October is a crazy month there for Alabama. Georgia, Tennessee, A&M. Some people may not be that high on Tennessee. Who knows what they'll be. But you would assume Georgia and A&M are probably going to be top 10, 15 teams at worst. So at the least, they've got 2 out of 3 really tough games, and another one maybe that's not so tough, but they got to go on the road in a rivalry game. So A&M, we'll talk about them at some point. They've got a really good squad coming off a playoff appearance last year. What is Alabama's record going to be through those 3 games? Okay, then they get a bye week in week 9. And then week 10, they go to LSU. So thank God they have a bye in there because they have a stretch right there. Georgia, Tennessee, A&M, bye at LSU. LSU obviously has Lane Kiffin now. Lane Kiffin is 0-5 all time against Alabama. And that counts a game he was with the coach at Tennessee, and then the 4 game times he played him when he was at Ole Miss. So Bama's got that edge over him, right? But Lane Kiffin's obviously going to want to win this game. LSU, this is 100% going to be a night game, right? In Death Valley at LSU. Scary. Good thing they got a big bye week before this. I would assume LSU maybe has a bye week before this too. It seems like this may be their, like Georgia and all Florida always have a bye week before they play each other. Might be the same thing here for Alabama and LSU. And then week 11, they go to Vanderbilt. 3rd year in a row they're playing this game. How will they be after this stretch? This is the question, right? They have that whole stretch they're going through at Georgia, at Tennessee, A&M, bye at LSU. Then they got to go back on the road to Vanderbilt. Vanderbilt obviously has their big win back out in Vandy in 2024. A whole new team. Diego Pavia is not there, but you would assume the 45,000-foot stadium is going to be absolutely rocking in Nashville, Tennessee in this game. And this is late after a long stretch. How's the health going to be at this point for Alabama? Interesting spot. And then Chattanooga in week 12. And then week 13, they've got Auburn. They got Auburn at home. Fun stat for you guys again. They have not lost to Auburn at home since Cam Newton was the quarterback at Auburn. So they have not lost to Alabama and Tuscaloosa in a long, long time. I've said I'm higher on Auburn before, so we'll see how that is. But it's the Iron Bowl. Anything can happen in a rivalry game. All right. We're going to talk about Oregon's 2026 schedule here in a second. Take a sip of water. The talking nonstop. Mouth is so dry. Maybe I should stop doing so many zins during the day. It's probably drying my mouth a little bit. But anyway, Oregon 2026 schedule. I'm probably smacking my lips a little bit too much. Sorry. Oregon 2026 schedule. Big Ten schedule. I know we talked about Ohio State's last week. Oregon and Ohio State do play, so we'll talk about that. This one's a little lighter than Ohio State's. I said Ohio State kind of had a tough one. I think I look at this and I don't see as much trouble. There's still some trouble. I think the Big Ten obviously has some good teams that are showing up, but let's take a look at it. All right, week 1, they've got Boise State. New Pac-12 team, you guys didn't know. Boise State is now in the Pac-12. A bunch of teams from Mountain West moved over to the Pac-12. So let's see if Boise State will hold it down for Oregon's old conference. Week 2, they go to Oklahoma State. New coach, Eric Morris. New quarterback, Drew Messamaker. Sneaky game here in Stillwater, Oklahoma. So last year they played this game in Eugene. Oregon won by like 1 million points. There was a whole Mike Gundy conversation or press conference moment when he said something about how Oregon pays for all their players. So this is a different team that they're going to face. They got to go to Oklahoma. Like I've said, high on Drew Messamaker. I don't know how good Oklahoma State's going to be. I think their offense will be good. This is a big test for Oklahoma State, but also you got to go on the road. I would assume this place is going to be jumping. There's going to be a lot of life for Oklahoma State fans, so this will be a fun one to watch in week 2. And then week 3, they got Portland State, in-state game. Got to have the Portland versus Oregon game. If you didn't know, Portland is the capital of Oregon. I believe it is. I may have just made that up, but I'm pretty sure it is. Week 4, they go to USC. Big one. Big one. Big Ten test very early in the season. Last year, this game was 41-27. Oregon won. It was all offense. Oregon has won 4 games in a row against USC. USC is, a dangerous team as well. I had them in my way too early top 10. This is going to be a fun one early in the season to see who's who. All right, which of the old Pac-12 teams is going to put their stamp on the Big Ten early in the season in September. Week 5, they didn't have a bye week. So an early bye week, which means they're going to end the season playing 8 straight games. Something to look out for. I don't know, like usually we have 2 bye weeks, but now the way the schedule's set up, everybody has 1 bye week, and Oregon has theirs pretty early. Just something to take a look at, like as we go through the season. UCLA week 6, haven't lost to UCLA since 2017. If I was picking wins or losses right now, I'd probably say this is definitely a win. Bob Chesney, obviously the new head coach over there at UCLA. I don't really know anything about UCLA other than they're going to have Nico. You would assume they got a new head coach. It's hard to imagine UCLA being that competitive. Maybe they've got some new life. I would imagine Oregon's going to handle that. Week 7, they've got Nebraska. Last time they played Nebraska, fun stat for you guys, was they had a home-and-home 2016 and 2017. Nebraska won in 2016. Oregon won in 2017. I've talked about Nebraska last week a little bit. I think they're falling hard. They lost Raiola. Raiola is now a backup quarterback at Oregon. So, revenge game for Nebraska for taking their quarterback. Who knows? But I don't, like I said, that game's in Eugene. I don't really know how much I trust Nebraska to go in there and do much. At Illinois in week 8. Is this a big noon kickoff game? Is it? I believe week 8 is the same week that Indiana and Ohio State play. Is this big noon kickoff or is this CBS? 3:30. That's just a question. Remember, when we get to this point in week 8 next season, be like, wow, who's getting the big noon kickoff this week? Is it Indiana, Ohio State, or is it Illinois, Oregon? Let me double check my notes from last week. Let me see if I can pull up Ohio State's schedule and figure out. No, I stand corrected. Week 7. Week 7 is when Indiana, Ohio State plays. So week 8, this could be big noon kickoff. Just putting it out there. Week 9, Northwestern. Went to Northwestern last year. Oregon did. Won by about 20, 30 points. Northwestern's a hard team to assume it's going to win a lot of games, especially against the big teams. Week 10, they go to Ohio State. So remember, this is the 5th game in a row they're going to be playing. Ohio State, I just looked at the schedule from they're playing. They're going to be playing at USC, and then they're going to come home and play this game against Oregon. So they're going to be coming back from the West Coast, and then Oregon's going to have to go to West Coast to the East Coast or Central, whatever time zone Ohio's in. A big hoot game, right? I mean, you've got to assume neither of these teams is going to have, more than one loss, you would assume at this point. I mean, if either of those two teams have 2 losses at this point in the game, I mean, it's obviously an elimination game at that point, but you would probably assume safely they're both going to have one loss at this point, maybe none. So whoever wins this, I mean, like I said, probably in the driver's seat. Oregon did win the last time they went to Columbus in 2021. Week 11, they get Michigan at home. These guys played in 2024. Oregon won the game. What will Michigan be like? That's a big question. Obviously, Kyle Whittingham coming up from Utah. No Sharon Moore. Bryce Underwood's still there. They lost Justice Haynes, the running back. I'm not really sure what we're supposed to expect out of Michigan right now. I do think that Oregon, having Michigan at home, is probably not going to play well out for Michigan, but who knows? If we're in November and Michigan's playoff team, then this gets really interesting. Week 12, they go to Michigan State, who has Pat Fitzgerald now. I don't really have a strong opinion on Michigan State. They obviously don't have Aiden Childs anymore. He transferred out. So not sure. You would assume this late in the season, let's say Oregon's got 1 or 2 losses, this is not going to be a game they're going to titty-tat around with, if that's the correct way of saying that. And then week 13, they've got Washington at home. This is obviously a huge rivalry. Is Washington a sneaky team? With the Damon Williams situation, you have to think about that. Obviously, he tried to leave and then came back. I don't know if anybody saw Jed Fish's quote tweet of Josh Pate's top 12 programs list today. He was upset that Josh Pate didn't say Washington was a top 12 program in college football. So we'll see. I don't know. Washington, I know they just won a national championship not too long ago, but it doesn't really feel like they're that dangerous, especially when they match up against a team like Oregon. All right. Next thing we're going to talk about, worst jobs in college football. Now, a couple preferences before I get into my list here. One, this is Power 4 only, okay? This is not going to be, like I said, I think I said in the intro, this is not going to be UMass, Kent State, none of that. We're doing Power 4 teams. Second thing is I tried to include one team. No, I didn't try. I did. I included one team from each conference. Okay, there's five on the list. One team, each conference, Power 4 conference is represented. So just know that. 3, the criteria you got to think is history. History is a program. That's part of it, not all of it. What I kind of project you to be going forward in the next 5 to 10 years, that's something, location, where you are, just all that stuff. The money, like how much money you have compared to other teams, where, all of that goes into it, okay? It's all jumbled up, put it in the bowl, stir it around, and this is the 5 teams that I got, okay? Again, I'd love to see your list if you have a list. If you don't, then don't say anything. All right, here we go. Big reveal. Top 5 worst jobs. I'm going to go 5-1 on this one. 5-1. Number 5, I got Stanford. Now, Stanford, one of the things that I probably should have preferenced a second ago is or maybe I did, in the conference where you're on now. Stanford's in the ACC now, okay? So first of all, your travel schedule is absolutely brutal, okay? Unless you're playing California or a home game, the closest you can be in a conference game is SMU, which is Dallas, Texas. So that's not where you want to be, right? 2, the academic standards at Stanford are insane, if you didn't know. It's like one of the hardest schools to get into, okay? So sure, that's all fine and dandy, and, that's a nice stamp for them, outside of football. But to get good college football players to get into your school, that's the whole thing. Maybe people don't think about that, but that's a thing. And then 3, John Harbaugh and David Shaw had Stanford at a good spot for a while, right? But you've got to really think about that for a second, right? John Harbaugh is the head coach of Jim Harbaugh. Jim Harbaugh is the head coach of the Los Angeles Chargers now. He was the head coach of Michigan, right? Won a national championship. He was the head coach of the San Francisco 49ers before that. So that's a really good head coach, right? And then David Shaw, I'm not sure where he is nowadays, but he was wildly renowned as a very good head coach as well. He was getting NFL offers, I remember, back in the day when he was still coaching. So it took 2 head coaches to get them to the pinnacle of where they've ever been, right? And a guy like Andrew Luck and guys like Christian McCaffrey. They have not been back ever since. So they had some good years, but overall, they're not really one of the top programs. And I think it's just a really tough job to have right now. Number 4, I got Mississippi State. Like I said, I had to include each conference. Okay, that was my rule. Is I'm going to include each conference here. Now, a lot of people were like, "Well, Vandy is obviously been one of the worst jobs in the SEC." Okay, let me ask you something. Would you rather live in Nashville, Tennessee, or Starkville, Mississippi? I'm just asking. I'm asking. If you want to live in Starkville, Mississippi, you go ahead. I do not. Okay, that's number 1. Before Dan Mullen, this team was never good. Okay, before Dak Prescott, and here's one thing: when you think about Mississippi State football, okay, can you give me one win that you remember being like that was the moment Mississippi State got put on the map? No, you can think about that one time that they were ranked high at number 1, and then what happened? They lost all their important games. They were 9-0, one season, and then they lost every important game they had to play that year. So Mississippi State has never really been up there. Mike Leach and Dan Mullen gave them some really good years, but they're not a good spot. They're 23rd most losses ever in college football. You're number 2 in your own state. You're in your Mississippi. Mississippi State, and I think in terms of going forward, I don't like Jeff Lebby, good offensive mind. I just don't think in terms of where we are now, Mississippi State is going to ever be good. I just don't think they will. I think the resources and everything else, everyone else has way better than you. Baseball school only. Number 3, I got Kansas. Again, every conference has to be represented, so this is my Big 12 representative. This one really hinges hard on the history of Kansas football. Okay, they have not been as bad recently, but not as bad recently as like they won 9 games a couple years ago, and they've won 6 games, and then they've won 5 games. Okay, that's like the best Kansas has done since the one time they went 11-1 or 12-1, whatever it was, back in like 08, 07 with Mark Managoli. I'm saying his name right, the big fat guy that Adam. You remember, if you remember 07 season. But look, Kansas State's not a great team either, and they're probably still better than Kansas in terms of football programming in their own state. The last 10 years, Kansas has 36 wins. So that means they've won 3 games in the last per season, 3.5 games per year. Not good. And look, they're doing a lot of stuff out there at Kansas to, make their football team look cool and look better. Bring about the location. Tough place to sell. Okay? Basketball, they got it going on. No doubt about it. Not football. Number 2, I got Boston College. Not a good team. And this one really preferences on the future. Okay? Because they're not historically that bad of a team. Like they've been flirting with 7 wins, 6 wins. They've been to a bunch of bowl games in the last 10 to 15 years. But they have Bill O'Brien. Now say what you want about Bill O'Brien. Bill O'Brien was once an NFL head coach, resurrected Penn State back in the day. And then before that, they had Jeff Hafley, who's now the head coach of Miami, the Miami Dolphins. And both of those guys can't do shit with this team. It's a terrible location. You're in Boston. You're in Boston. No one cares about college athletics in Boston. Okay, that is a pro town. And you talk about going forward, it is going to be hard, very hard to sell. And a lot of these teams, they're stepping stone teams. If you get any good player at any one of these teams, they're going to leave. Same thing with the coaches. And that brings me to number 1, Purdue. Purdue since 2013. Okay, here we go. 1-11, 3-9, 2-10, 3-9. All right. They hired Jeff Brom. 7-6, 6-7, 4-8, 2-4, 9-4, 8-6. Jeff Brom leaves. 4-8, 1-11, 2-10. That's awful. They the best team they ever had. They went 9-4, and then they went 8-6, 9-4 with the postseason win. So they were 8-4, and then 8-6. They went to the Big Ten championship that year in that Big Ten East or West, whatever it was, when like every team sucked. You knew what it was because Ohio State, Michigan, and Penn State were all in one division. 27th most losses of all time. And it used to be Indiana was the worst team in the state. Well, now they've got to compete with Indiana in their own state for worst football team, and they're way behind. Look, they're in the Big Ten. They're not going to be good at football for a very long time, no matter how hard they try. This is the worst job in college football. I don't think it's an argument. I put up a reply. Shout out Tom DiNatale. He put this one as I put a reply Instagram story. He said Purdue, worst one. Caleb said Rutgers. I think Rutgers is, it could be considered up there as one of the worst jobs, but you're not really in a football town. I mean, New Jersey, whatever. I don't know. But I think Rutgers still can get talent because of where you are. And I think, has put out some okay teams. And I think project-wise, you can still win some games at Rutgers. You're not going to win games at Purdue, Boston College, Kansas, Mississippi State, or Stanford. It's just the proof. It's just the proof. So those are my 5 worst jobs in college football. Love to hear your list if you got one. If you don't, well, then I don't want to hear your opinion. All right. Last thing before we get out of here. Trinidad Chambliss was ruled eligible for 2026. A lot of people got opinions on this, okay? And that's fine. If you want to know the whole story, right, Trinidad Chambliss finishes the season in the Final Four in the Fiesta Bowl. Then he applies for another year from the NCAA. They denied him 3 times. Once on January 9th, once on February 5th, and then once on February 12th. Well, on February 12th, he was in a state court in Mississippi and decided, his lawyers or whatever got him in a state court because guess what? The judge is an Ole Miss grad, and they want to have another year. So there is an interesting part into what his whole argument was. So at Ferris State, he was there from 2021 to 2024. He had a redshirt year, and then there was a year in 2022 he had some respiratory issues and he didn't play. He didn't even dress out for the team. And he was told he was going to get a medical red shirt from his head coach, whoever that was, and basically somehow didn't get it. Like, they didn't give him the medical red shirt. So he was arguing basically he was robbed of a eligibility year, which kind of makes sense if you think about it. But, and where we are now, I mean, there's guys that and this is going to be his 6th year of college football. So it's not the worst. Okay, like Joey Aguilar's out there fighting for year 8. There's a guy at Montana State who just got year 9. So this would be 6th year with a red shirt and a medical red shirt year that he's saying he didn't get. So I think it's if you're I said it earlier in the top 10, if you're a fan of Ole Miss, right, this is awesome because he was a great quarterback. If you're playing against him, you're probably not that excited about it. I think this instance, and I think all of these eligibility things are, certain cases. Like, everything is different. This one makes sense to me that he should get another year. Like, if he didn't play for 2 whole years, like redshirted and then a medical red shirt, based on everything else I've seen, this seems fair to give him the ruling. The NCAA argued their whole thing, like, that he could have played in that year that he had the respiratory issues, but he chose not to. That was the whole argument. I don't know. In terms of where we're going with the whole eligibility rules, I heard a lot of people say, we should go 5 years. That's it. You get 5 years. You start the clock. At the end of the 5th year, it's over. Don't think it's ever going to be that simple because the NCAA doesn't really have any power, and I guess you just have to give court to make that decision. Well, there's all these things, about these players now that they can make money and, like, this is technically a job, all of that hoopla, right? I think maybe giving them 6, which I would be okay with. I know it's not, perfect. These kids go get a job, all that type of shit, right? But I think 6 would be somewhere if we could just say, hey, everybody gets 6 years, okay? And that includes anytime you redshirt or you get a medical red shirt, you get 6 years. It may not be like the greatest thing in the world, but maybe there's a compromise. 5 years, we'll see if that includes all the red shirts and medical red shirts. Another thing about red shirts is they just had a vote, the coaches did, at a meeting like a month ago, that they want to try to move the red shirt rule up to 9 games. Now, that has to still get approved. But could you imagine? I mean, you could redshirt after playing basically all the games until you're eliminated to the playoffs and be like, all right, done with that. I heard one thing that was interesting to me, and it was Mark Pope said this, the Kentucky basketball coach. And I don't think the NCAA owns the college football playoff, so I'm not sure if they could do this in college football. But he said in terms of basketball that if the NCAA, which does own March Madness, if you want to make a stand, basically be like, well, if you're going to have somebody play we ruled ineligible, you're ineligible for the postseason. Now, that would get it done. I think that would 100% solve the problem. Again, I don't know. I would need to double check. I thought I already did. I don't have it down. But I don't think the NCAA owns the college football playoff. So, therefore, I don't know if they would really be able to make a ruling on that. But the problem is we're just always going to end up in these situations where the NCAA says one thing, and then they can just go in the court and say another thing, and we're never going to get anything solved. So, the only solution is what? That Supreme Court has to say, all right, 5 years or 6 years with a red shirt. Maybe 6 years with a red shirt. 5 years, no red shirt. Is that the best option? It could be. But in terms of Trinidad Chambliss, I think a lot of these situations are case by case, and I think in his case, it's not that bad that he got this. the NCAA is in a impossible situation. Again, anything they say and do will be held against them in the court of law, literally. So I don't really know where they can go or what they can do other than banning postseason play. If they can do that, we'll see. I don't know. But that's my opinion on the Trinidad Chambliss situation. All right, that will wrap up episode 2. Thank you guys so much for being here. I really appreciate it. Have a lot of fun talking college football. Again, follow Deep Shot Sports on Instagram and TikTok. Subscribe to the YouTube. Please, 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 trying to get to 500 subscribers ASAP. If you watch live, thanks for sitting through this whole thing, listening to some ball talk. You can watch this, obviously, after on YouTube. It'll also be on podcast and Spotify, so make sure you subscribe there as well. I will see you guys next week on Tuesday. Deep Shot Garry out.